Hi, Bill Mew here. Welcome back. As you can see, we're not in our normal studio today. I'm coming to you from Nottingham, and I'm joined by Des. Where are you?
Yes, you'll be very surprised to know that I'm in Sydney. We're currently being flooded out with extreme weather, as to describe it. So we're most envious of your European weather at the moment, Bill.
Now, one of the topics that we wanted to focus on today was all around how we can collectively address the cybersecurity threat. And NIST have done a lot in this particular area, but there's a new initiative that they've done. That Des, I know you've written something. Tell everyone a little bit more.
Indeed, we've got 3 or 4 stories we want to cover today in Elnion's Highlight News, and it's been great to do this on the road, and we should do more of these. So NIST has announced another industry consortium. This one's focused on managing a critical vulnerability database. This initiative was actually implemented around about 2005, but not so long ago it was disbanded. They got to the point where I think there was about 4,000 vulnerability signatures in the system that just weren't able to be caught up with. So I put together a short piece around it that I'd love people to jump online and have a look at elnion.com of what NIST is doing, the American National Institute of Standards and Technology, aka NIST. And I've also highlighted some of the action they're doing with various partnerships and so forth. And Bill, I know you've got a little piece here with regard to the US looking to Australia in this case, with regard to what we're doing with social media identity verification.
Well, interestingly enough, somebody's done some research in the run-up to the election in the US, which, unless you're under a rock, you must be aware of. There is obviously some concern in terms of the potential for misinformation and manipulation across social media channels and elsewhere. This is nothing new. People have always sorted to influence elections from all different perspectives. But I think we've seen with social media recently that this can be done on a fairly industrial scale. And the concern here is that we will see a repeat. It could even be even worse this time round. To an extent, we are far more aware of the threat now. But the concern is that some of the platforms have, if anything, disinvested in a lot of their monitoring and content moderation resources. The research showed that there was really quite popular support for the sort of age verification and identity verification that we've seen elsewhere. And Des, I know that Australia was a country that led in this particular arena.
Yeah, well, I think we were talking about this offline, but for our audience today, here on our on-road version of elnion.com's highlight news updates, as many people know, Australia has led in a number of very key initiatives that impact people's lives. A long time ago, we dealt with the whole gun issue. We literally did that in a week. We've got a number of challenges with regard to big tech companies where we've taken them to task and put law in place to essentially put some guardrails around them. And this one is no different. We have looked at the whole social media challenge. And, the topic of free speech is all well and good, but when the impact outweighs the benefit to society as a whole, again, it needs to be looked at. And so we've got measures being put in place with that. And as you said, the US is looking to not just what Australia is doing, but other parts of the world, particularly Europe, where those sorts of initiatives have been implemented successfully. So much so, I know at least one state in America has actually implemented law now where children from the age of 14 and under are not allowed to actually be on social media, and anything over that age actually does need some sort of verification. I believe I've seen a couple of mentions with regard to stories where other states are now looking at following suit with that. And there's a whole bunch of issues around that, but mental health is one of the key drivers that they're talking about. And I know that a lot of the tools that are going to be required for this are going to be powered by the types of AI that we've been talking about a lot. And you had a piece also that I'd love to direct people to on elnion.com, and that's just around the whole topic that AI is actually not magic.
Indeed, and I would encourage them to go and have a look at many of my thinkings in there in terms of setting expectations from the software to the processing power to all of the different fundamental blocks that need to be in place to enable this kind of revolution through AI. But one of the areas interesting that was commented on was the fact that there have been great expectations that AI would absolutely revolutionize the arena for cybersecurity. And yet we've not yet seen that revolution. And there was a particular comment that I included from the head of security at the Pentagon, who was asking industry, where are my AI cybersecurity tools, because nothing's materialized yet. But also on the regulation front that you touch on, the concern is that obviously America is a collection of 50 states, and at the moment, if things are at a state of gridlock centrally, then things are going to be enacted at the state level, and we risk having a patchwork arrangement of many different regulations, which will make it very difficult for companies to adhere to every single different one. There's some very notable and worthy lawmakers centrally who are seeking to push forward regulations around security and on privacy, but they're struggling to do just because of the gridlock there. And I think that we've achieved that in Europe and Australia and elsewhere, but it hasn't been straightforward, it hasn't been easy, and I know that Europe led with GDPR, and we've recently done our own AI regulation. My concern here is not necessarily that having regulations for regulation's sake is a good thing. We need the right regulation. The concern is the enforcement, and this takes us back to the NIST topic that we started with, where I think there is an ongoing battle where there is a sort of axis of evil, those countries and those players that are seeking to threaten us, and there is the good guys. And I think the NIST initiative, and maybe you could explain how this collaboration is being coordinated, but the NIST initiative is bringing together a lot of the white hat to help them collaborate on vulnerability. My concern is that that only goes on so far if the black hats are operating from safe havens that are beyond the reach of the arm of the law.
Yeah, indeed. I love that axis of evil. I haven't heard that term for a couple of decades, but it is very much the case coming back. I would direct people to Elnion.com to have a look at the full story, but in short, essentially what's happened is that the NIST team have looked at what has been implemented back in 2005. Over a couple of years, it hasn't necessarily met their expectations. They've revisited it. They've reformed a consortium of third-party companies to help them get back up to date, and then essentially develop strategy on how they're going to maintain and grow that. And what really I think stands out is that they're looking for industry collaboration, keeping in mind that the government shouldn't necessarily be the sole responsible party for this. And that's from industry operators. If you remember the likes of, say, Elnion Vault, which was recently acquired by AT&T, one of the largest globally community-based security databases in real-time monitoring and all the way through to vulnerabilities. I think this is going to be, an approach that is going to be repeated with that because it's proven to work. And another topic I want us to wrap up on, and I'm going to get your thoughts on this, but with a lot of the work that I'm doing at the moment in particularly finance, companies are starting to now realize that, as with cloud, this wasn't a decision that they got to make for the most part. A lot of organizations talked about implementing cloud solutions or adopting cloud solutions that went all the way back to getting a credit card and buying a single seat for a CRM on the likes of Salesforce. But then eventually Microsoft just said, well, there's no choice. If you want our software, it's all on cloud. And if you're a consumer of Microsoft Office 365 and the entire Office suite that comes with it, and Teams, which has now been separated, as most people probably know, as a separate product, unbundled as it were, you could only get that as a cloud service, as a software as a service. And so a lot of companies I'm working with at the moment are concerned about the same thing happening to them with AI, and that is that the opportunity to leverage and implement and adopt AI, particularly generative AI, was something they were looking at. And we've been developing AI strategies for them, roadmaps to implement various parts of AI solutions. What they're realizing now, and they've come back to us, is, okay, this is just going to happen whether we like it or not. When we open up our emails, we start typing, it is auto-completing sentences to the point where it's sort of grayed out and you just hit a tab to get the whole completed sentence. These generative tools are being baked in. And what these CEOs and board members are saying was, well, how do we get a return on investment on this? Because let's assume like cloud AI is going to essentially be enforced on us without our choice. We don't get to get an email client without generative AI built in, they're saying. we're going to have to go through, employing people with skills to use these tools, or we're going to have to retrain people, put them through certification processes to make sure they can use the tools properly, put some guardrails and guidelines in place to manage the adoption of those and ensure that we are actually not only using them properly, but also that they're producing the right content. And so I'd love to circle back to you in a second with this whole challenge of, understanding what it means to get a return on investment or an ROI from the adoption of generative AI early, or effectively then having it essentially implemented on your behalf in the tools you take for granted, because it seemed very much as a double-edged sword. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But I'm keen to get your thoughts on that, Bill.
Well, one of the interesting things, and there's another article I've started to put together, which I hope to publish soon, so do come back to Elnion soon to see it. It's focusing on the fact that whilst we're seeing limited implementation of many of the current regulations on big tech, who to many extents appear to be above the law in many of the things they're doing, one of the areas where we have seen some movement has been around antitrust. And in very recent period, we've seen Europe open an inquiry into a lot of the big tech. And one of the areas that they focused on, certainly with Microsoft, has been the way in which it bundles and prices a lot of its tools with its cloud to providing a favourable playing field to Azure over a lot of the independent cloud providers. And following in Europe's lead, we've seen that South Africa have also introduced a very similar investigation looking into that sort of bundling and pricing structure. So I think whilst some of the regulatory areas, I think there hasn't been enough enforcement on big tech, I'm very interested to see how this will go, and whether lessons learnt here in this side of bundling will also be applied when it comes to the way in which AI tools are bundled and priced. So I think there's a lot of a road yet to be travelled on that, and there's a lot that we'll see from some of these inquiries and the impact that they'll have to the sort of antitrust enforcement around how these kind of bundles, whether we're talking about Office and cloud or whether we're talking Office and cloud and AI.
Indeed. Well, it's been great to do this on the road Elnion.com news highlights update with you, Bill. I think we should do more of these and find some exciting locations to dial in from. But folks, thanks for joining us this week. It's been great to share some insights with you. We would love you to go and visit Elnion.com. We would love you to follow us on the various platforms on Facebook, Business, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. And comment which stories are getting your interest. Also, let us know which stories you'd like to hear about us from on. And if you'd like to contribute, also reach out. And as Bill mentioned, there are new stories coming almost every day and new highlights. And so we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Bill, great to see you here at the virtual desk. And I suspect next week we'll be back at the proper desk.
Well, farewell from Nottingham. Look forward to seeing you from somewhere else next week.
Thanks, Bill.